Just 1 minute. Yes, sir, we can start. Muted
All of
everybody.
you, good evening, all of you. Welcome to this 43rd edition. We again have a stalwart with us, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri, sir. Next slide, please. I'd like to hand over the stage to Professor Dr. Tufan Pati, sir, from Cuttack. He doesn't like his slide to be read, sir. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alim. So we have this 43rd edition with Dr. Shekhar Seshadri as a faculty speaker and the key attraction today evening and on many evenings. The moderators today are Dr. Amrit Patjoshi, who is a neuropsychiatrist, psychotherapist, and wellness consultant. He is professor of psychiatry in High Tech Medical College, and he is consultant in Amri Hospital and Healing Touch Clinic. He is a direct council member of IPS and editor of Odisha Journal of Psychiatry. He is the chief coordinator of UNICEF WCIPS initiative on telemedicine on psychosocial management during COVID-19. And we have with us Dr. Alim Siddiqui from Lucknow, the Nawabs Nagar. He is the director of Healthy Minds Neuropsychiatry and Behavioral Sciences Center, Lucknow. He is visiting professor of psychiatry, Eras Lucknow Medical College and Hospital, Lucknow, and GSB Medical College, Kanpur. He had been a past direct council member of IPS, and he's a guest faculty of IMIT University, Lucknow. He's finance secretary of IMA Lucknow, as well as IAPP, UP and UK chapter. Welcome, Alim and Amri. And we have got two distinguished chairpersons today, Dr. Sarmishta Chakrabarti from Kolkata. She is senior consultant psychiatrist in Columbia Asia Hospital, consultant psychiatrist Ramakrishna Mission Seva Pratishthan, founder director of Insight Medical Center, Baliganj Place. Training, she has got 22 years of experience in psychiatry practice, child and adolescent psychiatry in Cardiff University Hospital, trained in psychotherapy in Hammersmith Hospital. His achievements include ex-EC member of IPS West Bengal branch, representative to East Zone. She had been the chairperson of Women's Specialty Section of IPS, appearances in several national programs and TV channels, awareness programs in online and offline platforms, columnist in Bengali journals and newspapers, organized several national and international conferences. She is a fellow of Royal College of Psychiatrists, and fellow of IPS, and a member of American Psychiatric Association. Welcome, Sarmishta. We are pleased to have you. And we have with us.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Let's change the slide. Dr. Bishal Chabra from New Delhi. He's alumnus of Kasturba Medical College, Manipur. He has 18 years of experience in clinical practice after completing his PG, while working in various system institutions like EBOS, CTB Hospital, Women's and Metro Hospitals. He is currently senior consultant Fortis Healthcare, besides running his private clinic in Rohini. He is life fellow of IPS, IABP, IASP, and IAPP. He is the recipient of Ravi Pandey Memorial Award in 2006, WPA Fellowship in Child Psychiatry 2008, and SN Federation Fellowship in 2012. He has published 12 articles in Next journals and 2 chapters in psychiatry textbooks. Besides, and he is an editorial board of the Delhi Psychiatry Journal. He is currently the vice president of Delhi Psychiatric Society. His areas of academic interest include phenomenology, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, psychopharmacology, and neurobiology. In his free time, he is interested in personal development books and courses, history, photography, traveling, and exploring spiritual dimensions of life. Versatile Bishal Chabra, welcome you too. And with this, I hand over the proceedings up to the webinar to the chairpersons, Dr. Bisala and Dr. Sarmishta. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Sarmishta, if you want to go ahead and introduce the speaker.
Dr. Shekhar Seshadri has come online. Welcome, sir.
Yeah.
And then you can start.
Welcome, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri.
Welcome, Dr. Seshadri.
Dr.
Dr.
Shekhar.
Gautam Sai is also there. President is
Gautam, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, Dr. Gautam
Welcome.
Saha. Yeah.
Okay.
For those who
Please.
joined late, today's registration is above 1,000.
And rightly so,
Great.
because
Why?
because Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri is a stalwart.
Always.
And in this day and age, I mean, we've seen the first pandemic and now the second wave of the pandemic has hit all of us. So loss and grief has hit all of us. We've lost patients, we've lost friends, we've lost family. And if you ask me, about a week back, many of you know that I lost a near and dear friend. And to me, it was extremely difficult to explain and break the bad news to her 19-year-old daughter. So I've been suffering from bereavement, and I would like to learn and know from such a stalwart like Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri. Now, Dr. Sheshadri doesn't need any introduction. I mean, he is a name. So, but still, because it's the way it is, he is a graduate of Maulana Azad Medical College, Delhi, and a postgraduate in psychiatry from NIMHANS, Bangalore. He is currently Senior Professor, Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Associate Dean of Behavioral Sciences, NIMHANS. Besides working with child and adolescent mental health, including developmental disabilities, he is actively involved in the areas of gender and sexualities, violence, trauma and abuse, children in difficult circumstances, juvenile justice, experiential methodologies, school programs, teacher training in life skills, education, community and school mental health programs, forum theater and qualitative research. And if you need to contact him, we have his email, docshekharsheshadri@gmail.com. Welcome, Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri, and I'm so honored to be here and listen to you. I hand over to Vishal, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sharmishta. First of all, welcome to a large audience which has come today to listen to Dr. Sheshadri. So it's itself is testimony to his towering personality in our group, in our psychiatry group and psychology group. I'm sure a lot of psychologists also join us today. I'm going to set the context for today's presentation, today's talk, which is loss and grief, addressing the universal and personal context in the time of COVID. I was looking at the data. Till the second wave hit us in April, we had lost around 160,000 people to COVID. That's official figure. Maybe it's much more. And within a month, we have lost almost double of it. We're going to cross almost 3 lakhs by the end of this month. We have, as of today, it stands is 288,232 lives are lost to COVID. Some of us eminent psychiatrists, eminent doctors, hardworking frontline workers, and obviously family members from almost everyone around us. The second wave has hit us so badly. Where I stay in Delhi, we have 16 flats in the block I'm in. 12 had COVID. Almost everyone got COVID, including my family. And we lost 2 people of these, the place where I stay. And this story goes on throughout Delhi and also in a lot of other parts of India. The problem with the COVID deaths is the grieving process is very odd. I could only think of it as a warlike situation. When you go in a war, when the soldiers go out in a war, they die in battlefield. And if they're overseas, they're somewhere abroad, you can't bring the bodies back. So many times they used to be buried there or cremated then and there in the battleground. Family members never get to say final goodbyes to them. Grieving goes through, there's a process of grieving. We used to like, if you look at how somebody dies, the body comes back home, the body is washed by the family members, dressed up, and taken to the, either to graveyard or crematorium. The people go, people hug, people cry, people, bereave. They express their emotions. I know of cases, son can't go to a father's funeral because son is in a different city and there's lockdown and father's in a different city. So you hear stories like this, and this is so painful because yes, we all fight. Every family, we have issues and all, but when somebody dies, we all want to say final goodbyes to that person. And that is being taken away from us because of this COVID pandemic. We have to call people, we do public video calls, we have all the ceremonies on Zoom or other platforms. So the grieving process is really bereft of the meaning it had over the years. And we have to adapt very quickly to in last 1 year. And this, as I was mentioning, in 1 month or almost 1.5 months, we have lost 1.5 lakh people officially. Then maybe the direct toll is much more. And in my friends, in my distant family, I've lost people also. Dr. Shrimishta was also mentioning she lost a dear friend here. So this has hit us really hard. And I think that's why a lot of people have joining in today, more than 1,000 registrations, to listen to Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. So with this context, because this war-like situation, the way we can't grieve properly, the way it has caused so much of pain and trauma, I see almost every day one case where I'm seeing a patient of having depression or anxiety or some problem because they lost a family member, suddenly they don't know what to do. So that is happening, and that's creating a lot of pressure on us, both professionally and also in a personal life, because we see so much death around us. I'm not even talking about children who lost their families just now, and the tragedy in families, like how just now Amrit was talking about. Dr. Amrit was talking about an MP, I think from Orissa, who who's gone to COVID. His 3 sons gone to COVID. The family is totally devastated. I heard another story. There's out of 5 members, only 1 member is left of that house. So these are really heart-wrenching stories. These are really disturbing times. So I hope Dr. Shekhar Seshadri helps us in understanding how to deal with this drama, personal level, professional level, and at the society level. Over to sir.
Thank you very much, Vishal. Thank you very much, Sarmishta, and thank you very much, Tofan Alim and Amrit, for this session. Both Sarmishta and Vishal have laid a poignant and a very powerful context to what I wish to share with you. I was mentioning to Alim earlier when I spoke to him that this is not going to be a traditional session. I am not going to be using a PowerPoint presentation. I do not wish to trivialize the significance of this moment in this session by talking about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and some abstruse theories from psychology, because the truth, as Vishal points out, is what the pandemic has done is that it has completely ruptured our traditional notions of grief and the way that we respond to it. Those theories no longer really work because those theories were developed in some other context. And never has the world seen a devastation from a mental health perspective of the nature that we've been seeing for the last 1.5 years. That the reason, therefore, that I have used the word universal and personal is because what is happening in this pandemic is that the theme of COVID, the theme of illness, the theme of hospitalization, the theme of ventilators, and the theme, unfortunately, in many families of death, not just one, but of several, is of a nature that is now increasingly becoming universal. Yet, for many of us, it has a very personal feel, a personal immediacy, exactly as Sarmishta has pointed out. To be pressed into a situation where the breaking of bad news that, and one goes back to the whole premise of our basic training in medical education itself about communication, that and all the challenges of communication. How do you take history from a child? How do you take history in a trauma situation? Uh, s- Somebody has gone on screen share, perhaps, yeah. How do you take history uh, from someone who has a speech problem? How do you explain procedures? And how do you convey bad news? I would like to therefore start today's session by acknowledging the work of Muhammad Asim. Muhammad Asim is a Delhi-based journalist, and I would like to read from a blog that Muhammad Asim wrote called "We, the Pained People of India." I quote, "If pain is personal and individual, which is so often the case, it can drag us down into a solitary hole. But when it becomes shared and collective, pain can lift us out, extracting us from solitude into the company of those who are suffering as well. For days, I nurtured my deep pain within me, being the elder son who had to look after ill parents, mourning the loss of their loved son in law to COVID. I didn't have the time and space to process my emotions. I had to be strong for my sister and her two teen children who lost their partner and father in the cruelest fashion. I couldn't cry in front of them, could I? I vented one day in a Facebook post. I had to recount each and every horrid detail that I and my sister went through to clear the burden in my heart. That post was me crying out loud, writing, as they say, is cathartic. Then came a deluge of calls, messages from friends, from people I know, and also from total strangers. Thousands poured their hearts out. They showed support. They shared my pain. I got some of the most poignant and emotional messages from people that I had lost touch with or haven't met or spoken to in years. I welled up reading some of those. Many shared their own horrid experience and what they have been going through. I felt their pain. We became one. Our timelines and inboxes are a tide of grief and suffering. Who would have thought that condolences, RIP, broken heart emojis would become the top prompts on our phone keyboards? All around is a deluge of pain, desperation. Everyone is overwhelmed. We ought to share it. Tell others about ours and listen to theirs. No one will emerge unscathed from this pandemic. Everyone has been hit in some way. My heart cries for kids orphaned in a sudden brutal stroke. A dear friend who is part of a counseling collective was asked to talk to a 5-year-old who lost both his parents to COVID. The child tells her that everyone around is mourning and hasn't had time to talk to him. But I have lost my parents. No, just 5. What can anyone tell that boy to make him feel better? I cry with a professor friend whose husband is battling for his life in the ICU. She couldn't properly mourn a friend she had just lost. I had to stay strong for my son and husband, she tells me, sobbing on the phone. I let her cry for some time. There are few people in front of whom you can cry your heart out. For others who look up to you for strength, you put on a brave face. What do you tell a single mother who loses her son just 17 to COVID? Will any words ever bring any closure for her? You can only share and feel her pain. A very close relative looks after a special needs child at home while his wife is struggling for life in the ICU. He himself is unwell but cannot think of his own health. And the child asks him, is Mama going to become a star? Thankfully, her mother came back home. On a video call arranged by a good doctor, a young kid sings, Tera mujhse hai pehle ka naata koi, to his mother, breathing her last. Final goodbyes, no matter how painful, are very important. Can you ever listen to that song again without shedding a tear? A 19-year-old nephew who recently recovered from COVID goes to donate plasma in the middle of the night to a total stranger after an appeal on a social media platform. His mother is scared about him going to a hospital in the middle of the night, but she allows him to do so, staying awake and praying till he returns. They both feel good about helping someone in need. The nephew gets to know the next day that the person didn't make it. He grieves a stranger. Pain binds us all. This bond is the only system that is working today. I haven't had a positive dream in many weeks. I wake up in the middle of the night, palpitating, throat drying up, only to realize it was another of those nightmares of loss or of the desperation of being stuck in a terrible situation. Every sob, every cry, every scream, every share, every blank stare, every helping hand, every fading heartbeat is a monument of our shared grief. We will carry it and mourn it for the rest of our lives. Mohsin Muhammad Asim stays. All the incidents that I have noted above are real people, real families. I chose not to name them as it doesn't matter because we are no more individuals who are suffering. We are all part of this collective pain that India is today and the world is today. And that, my friends, with thanks to Muhammad Asim and his blog, is the beginning of what I mean by the collective and the universal and the balance that we make with the personal. To look at a new narrative, we need a reset, as I said in the last session, in intolerance of uncertainty, because COVID has so ruptured our clarities and our securities that we need a reset, and the only reset can occur that can occur is by social cohesion and by a collective notion and of solidarity. Exactly this month, 20 years ago, my father passed away, and I'm stating this as an important issue. He, of course, had a cardiac problem, and he didn't make it out of the ICU, and he was on a intubated. So the night before he died, he asked for a paper and pen, and because he couldn't speak, so he wrote. And these were the last lines that he wrote before he passed away. He writes, "We are all angels with one broken wing, and the only way we can fly is by holding each other." We are all angels with one broken wing, and the only way we can fly is by holding each other. And that is the only way, friends, in with by which we can actually deal with this grief. There are two kinds of narratives: logical narratives and narratives that are not so logical. If there is a 90-year-old man who has led a good life, he's invested well, he has children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, an extended family of 135 people spread all over the world. He's so slowly weakening and fading away. 70 of the 135 members of the extended family manage to gather. They're all together. He connects to them, they connect to him. He slowly fades away and dies. Fairly logical, the story. A 7-year-old kid is walking by. Some irresponsible electric lineman has left a live wire open. The kid is jumping in and touches it and gets electrocuted and dies. That's not a logical story, neither for that child nor for the parents. The logic of COVID and the logic of the pandemic, mathematicals model notwithstanding, and I said this last time also, predictions can only bring you that much nearer the truth, however robust they may be. There are imponderables and uncertainties that no robust mathematical model can predict, and certainly not with the COVID, given the kind of mutations that are taking place, and the fact that the profile has completely changed from the first wave, which was elderly with comorbidities, to the second wave, where healthy adults without comorbidities, even those who have been vaccinated, 50-year-olds, 52-year-olds, robust, healthy people are being taken away. So for each of us as professionals, and the importance of this session that IPS Odisha branch has organized is partly a reflection for ourselves. It is also partly the kind of work that you might be called upon to do in your clinics and your practice. And that's a remarkable thing about today's session, which is why I decided to eschew any PowerPoint presentation or going into. Uh, this is the time for perspective taking and to do the kind of reflection for which Sharmishta and Vishal have set such a powerful context of both the personal from Sharmishta as well as the universal, which Vishal has spoken about, precisely the subject of the presentation that I chose today, and the background of Muhammad Asim's presentation, which emphasizes that the only exit for us is the exit of sharing, of solidarity, and of social cohesion. Not that there will not be individual problems and individual griefs. And that brings me to the second issue that I want to share. You know, most people will experience loss at some point of time in their lives. And we know that grief is a reaction to any form of loss, not just of people, but of pets, and bereavement is a type of grief involving the death of a loved one. Now, interestingly, bereavement and grief is not just about sadness. ये केवल उदासी के बारे में नहीं है. उदासी भी है, लेकिन गुस्सा भी है. There is anger because of the struggle to find hospitals, beds, oxygen, and ventilators, and how people exploit stuff when exactly what happens in a disaster. And this process of adapting to a loss can vary very dramatically from one person to another, because it depends a lot on what your relationship was to what was lost, and what your belief systems is. And So there's a range of feelings that we go through, guilt and yearning and anger and regret and then sadness. And these emotions are very surprising because they can be mild or they can be intense. They can also be very confusing. One person among the many of you who are gathered here today may find yourself grieving actually a painful relationship. But for another one, the mourning of a loved one who died of protracted struggle with COVID may feel a relief that the person is no longer suffering. So this bounce, between different thoughts as you make sense of your laws. So what you do for yourself and what you do for others, because some thoughts can be soothing. She had a good life. He had a good life. And some thoughts can be very troubling. It wasn't her time. He was 17 years old. And then people assign themselves various levels of responsibility. There was nothing I could have done. On the one hand, it was my fault. I didn't try hard enough. So grieving behaviors have a wide range, and some people find comfort in sharing their feelings, and others may prefer to be alone with their feelings and engage in silent activities like exercising or writing. So, friends, there are two styles that are available to you. And there are two styles that you can possibly compassionately suggest to people who you're assisting in this collective experience that all of us are going through. One is instrumental grieving with a focus primarily on problem solving. Because mom has died. Father passed away a couple of years ago. She was living alone. I have to wind up her house. I have to find her bank papers. I have to get the certificates. I have her stuff. How much do I take back with me? Where do I shift it? Now, this style involves controlling or minimizing emotional expression because you have a lot to deal with. You have a lot of real life practical things. This is instrumental. But there's grieving that's intuitive also. It is of heightened emotional experience. It involves sharing feelings, exploring lost relationships, considering mortality. And I'm not suggesting that any one way is better than the other. I'm just saying that some people are more emotional. कुछ लोग भावुक हैं और उनको अपने भावनाओं में dive करना they like, whereas others are stoic. They may seek distraction from dwelling on an unchangeable fact of living. And each of you, friends, is unique. And you have unique needs when coping with loss. तो आपके सामने 4 tasks हैं. You have 4 tasks. And this is what J.W. Warden said. How do you accept the reality of the loss? And this is where, logical stories and stories that are not so logical, stories where you manage the hospital, you manage the bed, you manage good care, but there were issues of comorbidity, and there are stories where there was a struggle. The first story is related to feelings more of sadness and grief. The second story is tinged with high levels of anger with the system. And how do you work through either the pain of grief or the intensity of the anger to adjust to a life without the diseased, yet maintaining a connection to the disease while moving on with life? Your connection does not really. So there are things that people do, that you do, they are loss-oriented activities. You cry, you yearn, you experience sadness, you dwell on the circumstances of the death, and you avoid restoration activities. But there are restoration activities and stresses that are associated with secondary losses, and these involve lifestyle, routine, relationships, adaptation. So, how do you manage the change in routine? Develop new ways of connecting with families and friends and cultivating a new way of life. And most of us move back and forth between loss oriented and restoration oriented activities. We kind of move back and forth. Everyone grieves, friends, in their own way and in their own time. Some people seemingly recover in a defined period of time, others feel that they'll take a long time. Sometimes the deep sense of loss lasts a lifetime. But as someone often said, you may have lost a life, but you do not necessarily lose a relationship. And what is it that you choose to celebrate that? Which is why some people grieve for years without seeming to find even temporary relief. And this gets complicated, if there are other mood issues or issues of dependency, or there are complicated emotions that it's a difficult process, friends, particularly if you've lost a loved one. It's a difficult process. Whether the loss is because of death, as in the COVID pandemic, or it's because of a breakup. And one of the hardest challenges is to adjust to the new reality. And the kind of ideology that you come from, the kind of ideology that the clients you so ably assist, the kind of ideology that they come from, what is your attitude towards death? And how do you remember the disease? In some cultures, they grieve by attempting to forget as much as possible, and in fact, it's considered taboo. But in some places, you remember. You have transitional objects, and what is your personal ideology about emotional displays? This brings me to perhaps a very important aspect for your consideration in what all of us are dealing with at this point of time. While there are unique ways and stages, whether what we are feeling now is numbness, or whether it is despair, or whether it is uncertainty, or helplessness, or anger, or just fatigue. The point, friends, it's normal to experience these. It's normal because this is a completely abnormal situation for the last 1.5 years that all of us are collectively in. So, how we deal with it, whether we are doing self healing or self counseling, all these are matters of semantics. Let's not get caught in semantics. The issue is for each of us, first, how are we processing the event story of the deaths that we hear of? Now, when we work with a bereaved client, or when we are dealing with a bereavement within the family, or that of a close friend, as Sir Mishra referred to, what we need to really encourage ourselves and encourage our clients is to engage in a healing retelling of the loss. Create a safe space for yourself, for others to open up, to build trust, so that when the time comes to help, to rewrite the story of the loss, you communicate it effectively. And you do this by accessing the backstory of the relationship. So it's not just the loss event itself, because the loss event is embedded in your relationship with the loved one that you lost. So, as I said earlier, and in fact, um, this is a very powerful thing that Nehemiah said way back in 2013. Death may end a life, but not necessarily a relationship. So, how do you guide yourself? How do you guide your clients to reconstruct that bond with the loved one rather than relinquishing it? And it's then that you move to talk. Talk about the person you've lost. Ask about the person. Allow people to speak about the lost ones in a safe space. And here, friends, we must distinguish grief from trauma. If you or a client is struggling to get an image out of the head or experiencing flashbacks of all the drama that took place in this desperation for beds, that is trauma. And that actually keeps people from working through grief. And for many of these people, did I do well enough? Could I have done more? And the kind of grief and guilt that you feel, to organize the grief in a way, because feeling guilty about what you did or didn't do while the loved one was still alive, or feeling guilty about not feeling sad enough or moving on when the loved one is not there, to let go of this guilt and commit to living a life that will honor the person you have lost, even if that means forgetting about them for a little while. The issue is about honor. The issue is about holding on to the relationship. Death has only ended a life, not the relationship. And we call this companioning. Alan Wolfelt calls it companioning. In caregiving, in bereavement, in how you deal with yourself in your loss, you act as a companion to the person you're assisting. Sharmishta is a companion to her friend. She is present for her friend. She observes her experiences. However, observe in this context does not mean just watching, but it means bearing witness to their experience and to watch out for them. Companioning is about honoring the spirit. It's not about intellectual. It is about curiosity, not expertise. It's learning from them, not teaching them. It's walking alongside, not leading. It's being still, not being frantic. It's about discovering the gifts of sacred silence, not about filling every painful moment with words. It's listening with the heart, not analyzing with the head. It's bearing witness to the struggle of others, not directing them. It's being present in another person's pain, not taking away the pain. It's respecting disorder and confusion, not imposing order and logic. It's going into the wilderness of the soul with another human being, not thinking you are responsible for finding the way out. So, what do you need to do, friends? Listen to yourself. Listen to others in a supportive manner. Listen to your own concerns. Give yourself time. Help yourself and others recognize that their emotional reactions and what's happening to you is natural, normal, and to be expected. You must accord yourself that gentleness and that much of license and care. Assist yourself by organizing and prioritizing day to day and recovery related tasks. Help yourself and others recognize that the wide range of reactions to trauma, numbness, frustration, confusion, anger, anxiety, sadness, to recognize them. But they have strengths. You have strengths, you have healthy coping mechanisms that can permit you to gradually resume your pre loss level of functioning. Each individual, each of you has your own unique way. Dr. Kenneth Doka says, rituals, grieving rituals कहते हैं ना, ये, this is not just true about COVID. Even before COVID, whenever a loss took place by death, whatever the nature of the death was, and there are different kinds of death. Someone has cancer for 5 years, in and out of hospital, surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, multiple surgeries, slowly fading away. You know the. Somebody was absolutely healthy, no issues, went out, knocked on by a car, died, had a sudden first fatal heart attack. A child comes home, finds a parent hanging from the ceiling fan, death by suicide. A father has died. There is a lot of quiet whispers going around that he was not a good man. He had many relationships. We hear that he had unsafe sex. He had HIV. Whatever the nature and the context of these deaths, and it makes a difference in the kind of, but here in COVID, the theme is fairly common. We know the storyline. So when we speak of rituals of grieving, rituals of continuity, which establish that the loved one is still part of your life, that the bond is still there. Rituals of transition, the ritual that marks a significant change that has occurred in your response. Like the lady I referred to whose mother passed away did. She cleaned her room, she donated some of her belongings, she shifted some to storage, she brought some to the city that she was living in. Rituals of affirmation. Discharge any built up regret. Write a letter, write a poem to one you have lost, thanking them for their love and support. And rituals of intensification. These rituals connect groups, reinforce their common identity. Like when Vishal spoke about people who are in war and they're never found, when the unit gets together periodically to remember their fallen comrades, and what Vishal referred to is also known as ambiguous loss. When the person is physically absent but psychologically present, the body was never found. And sometimes ambiguous loss is also when the person is physically present but psychologically absent, as in the case of dementia or chronic mental illness, or where survivors of an act of violence revisit the site and place flowers or erect a memorial. That what Alim Siddiqui, Amrit Pattajoshi, and Tofan Pati have done in organizing today's session is actually helped us create a ritual of intensification. This entire group that is present here today, together in solidarity, to reinforce our common identity, to be intuitive grievers, experiencing feelings with openness and expressing it, whether we cry or whether we lament, because for us, friends, successful strategies involve the facilitation of our own experience and their ventilation. So I say finally, do not grieve alone. It's vital that you stay connected with others during your time. And that's what we've done today. Your support system may be your family, your friends, the IPS group, because it helps for arrangements that you may need to make and help you with new responsibilities and to find peace and comfort, to share your grief, to work through difficult emotions. You must take good care of yourselves. It's easy to forget about your own needs when you're reeling from loss, but neglecting yourself will not help you effectively deal with your grief. Do something creative, write something, eat, sleep, exercise. Be patient with yourself and allow yourself to feel whatever you feel and understand what triggers your grief and prepare for those triggers. Plan to take a day or two off work. Let your friends and family know that you need extra support. Before you do anything else, it's important to take stock of where you are with reference to the world around you. And if you meet people, particularly children, answer any questions that they ask, even if they are hard ones about death. Give them honest answers. Give children the choices whenever possible. Let them decide how they want to say goodbye. Allow them to join rituals. Encourage them to work. Talk about and remember the person who you lost. Don't avoid it. Respect that different children have different grieving styles. Listen to them without judgment. Allow them to say goodbye and take a break from grieving, and allow the child to take a break from grieving by responding to normal things that really take place. And it is in this context that I also have taken the liberty. We are doing a series on COVID in children, and the last session on Saturday is actually about grief and how do you work with children in the context of grief. This, friends, is the framework of what I wanted to share today. And thank you very much. So many of you who've been present today. I hope I have been of some assistance to all of you wonderful professionals of this very important profession in recognizing today the context and the complexities that Sarmishta and Vishal introduced, and the spirit of solidarity in which Tofan Alim and Amrit actually organized this today. I'm happy to spend the next half an hour in listening to some of the things that you want to say, and I hand you over to wishing all of you health and some level of solace in these very difficult times. We will come through, friends. We will come through because, like my dad said, we are angels with one broken wing, but we can fly if we hold each other. So let's hold each other and continue to fly.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. A comment in the chat box sums it all. Knowledge tree. It is to you, sir. You are our knowledge tree. That compliment is for you.
Nay,
So,
I just wanted to say, Alim, I've said this over and over again. I'm not the message, I'm only the messenger. If I sound effective, please understand it's only my struggle to represent the truth of the children and families I work with as much integrity as I can. I only convey what I hear and what I am experiences other people going through, and I share the work and the thoughts of many illustrious people who I have quoted, who work in this situation. But thank you very much for
thank you
that.
so much, sir. Over to chairpersons for their opening comments, and then we can go on for the discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Sheshadri. That was very nice. It allowed us to actually grieve. It allowed us to grieve also for the people we lost. I think this happened. It was a collective. It was like going to a chautha ceremony and listening to a learned person talk about life and death and the meaning of the whole thing. So this was really, I think, this was really cathartic for everyone. I hope people agree with my comments there. I wanted to actually do something but I initially, because the people who are still joining and a lot of people are joining, I wanted to take a moment silence, just 30 seconds, 1 minute silence for all the people we've lost, our friends, family, and everyone. So I would like to request everyone to just be silent for a minute, and then we'll take the further proceeding, if that is okay. If that is permission with everybody else. Is it okay? Okay.
Sure.
Just 1 minute silence, please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for doing this. I have been receiving a lot of questions. Should we take the questions now, or? But I wanted to.
Dr. Vishal, we can start the questions.
But I wanted to ask one thing from my personal thing also, and also a friend has asked it. See, as doctors, we are not trained to show our emotions. We are told to be very professional, and professional means you should not show your emotions. But I've been getting a lot of questions also in the chat, and they'll come. When you're in this situation, when you see death all around you, you're in COVID ward, and every day you're handing 1 or 2 or 3 people bodies to your family, it kills you somewhere. It destroys you somewhere. You can't just say, "Inki death ho gaya, aap le jao." It is breaking bad news is a thing. It's a technical thing. But what is your idea about it, sir? Should doctors show their emotions? They are human beings. They also can cry, drop a tear.
Vishal, the way I look at it is that we do know that all the old teachings about therapeutic neutrality and clinician objectivity and not showing one's emotions, and it had its place in the objective origins of what medicine was like, which is why it never ceased to surprise me uh, during surgery postings in medical school in the mid to late 70s, that if a patient died on the operation table, the person sent to convey the bad news to the family was always the junior most doctor. The professor would, or the surgeon would never do it. That uh, there was one of the first films that Robert Redford directed is a film called Ordinary People with Donald Sutherland and Sally Fields. It's a couple who have 2 sons, one of whom dies in a drowning accident, and the other son has severe survivor guilt and goes into psychiatric treatment. The psychiatrist was played by a person called Al Judd, who actually won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor that year. And there's a particular scene where this adolescent asks him, "Are you my friend?" And he says, "Of course I am. I will always be your friend." So the issue is not that in a given situation you allow your emotions to overwhelm you and you completely break down and get dysfunctional. But I think that a certain level of humanness and sensitivity uh, in emerging practices, and that's where we moved from the objectivity of psychoanalytic practice to the more person-centered approach, where the issue of uh, shared values and shared hopes and generating an unconditional positive regard, and how you show those in an emotive context, and that's what really builds a therapeutic alliance. I think somewhere we need to build a balance between this whole business of therapeutic neutrality or clinical objectivity, which was all right in the practice those days, to come, particularly in the situation of the pandemic, where we have to reconstruct new ways of creating solidarity and social cohesion. And I think COVID has completely changed the world order. It is going to change our thinking. Uh, 10 years from now, 25 years now, 50 years from now, when textbook of psychology are written, you'll find a completely different narrative, I can assure you. And I think, Vishal, the point that you're making, maybe this should be noted, and Alim Siddiqui and Amrit Patajoshi should note it, so that 50 years from now, people will say कि किसी विशाल छाबरा ने कहा था in 2021, and somewhere in 2051, he's being referred to as a person who tabled that there has to be a paradigm shift in the way that we approach practice. That's my response, Vishal.
Thank you so much.
So this is Sharmishta.
Ji.
Thank you so much. Spellbound, really. And so many comments that so many people have been spellbound. One of the comments has been, one not only loses the person in the present, one loses one's future with the person who is lost. So this is the exact feeling which my friend's daughter actually said, that we had so many plans and we just started our life. And, only thing I could tell her was that you still will have your plans, and the plans will be with people. There will be, you will have a bigger circle of people. And her mother was the only friend she had. I think that kind of speaks a lot. And now only thing I'm doing is every day I'm just asking her, are you all right? And, have you eaten? And things like that. So I think what you said was that in our school group, we just bring about good memories, what we spent with her in our school. So this collective kind of feeling, this collective remembering the good memories, her difficult days were terrible. The last few days were terrible. I think if we thought about those were traumatic days. So that's one of the things I think very.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to this, Sharmishta, in going ahead, that there are two aspects to maintaining this connectivity. One is the decision itself that you've spoken about. The other is in the dialectic of the communication, and I just wanted to expand a bit on that. See, there is a difference between the question, "Are you all right?" and "Have you eaten?" Uh, because when it is phrased in that dialectic, it necessitates or forces a certain kind of response. Whereas if the question is not "Have you eaten?", if the question is "What did you eat?", then the tenor of the communication changes. So the nuance of this communication in a situation like this, when you keep contact and you're going through an understanding of their day by questions which need not necessarily be answered in yes or no, but it gets into a little more detail. What did you eat? Or what time did you? Oh, that's good to hear. And today this is what I did. And where did you get the stuff from? Did you Swiggy it in, or did you manage to cook something on your own? And
Trying to normalize things, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were a couple of questions I saw on chat. One was with relation to when we speak about people's beliefs and their religious beliefs, and how do we work with them, and with what position does a therapist come. The idea in working with a client is really to understand what position of belief or lack of it does that person come from. And therefore your responses in communication are basically centered and contextualized on that. You may have your own belief systems that some of us believe, some of us do not, some of us are agnostic, some of us believe there is a higher power. We don't know whether that's a he or a she, or has no gender at all. and what happens to people when they die. Does Reshma Srinivas know? Does Bharati Rajguru know? Does Alim Siddiqui know? Do I know? I don't know what happens to people that, and what do children believe? That they become stars, they become trees, they become fairies. Um, and all of the above are right. And some people may be rationalist and say all you become after you die is either you're buried or you're burnt and you become carbon and nitrogen. That, but they're rationalists. That, but you allow for children in the specific context of my work to work within their belief systems. And belief systems is not just about religious belief systems. That there is a certain spiritual superstructure that all of us exist in, part of which is our religious inclination, but part of it is also beliefs that go beyond religious structures to look at what our notion of life, of death, of relationships, of emotions, of the cosmos, of nature, of emotions, of bonds, of connectivity, of rituals, of memory. All that is part of our spiritual life. And children recognize it because they have an inherent wisdom that and they have an inherent sense of the truth. And it's in that way that we really approach how we work within the belief systems of people to structure our responses.
Amrit, uh, Amrit, are you there?
Is Amrit there? Amrit,
Am I audible? Am I audible?
yeah,
Yes.
yes, you are.
Sir, sir, in the last 2-3 days, I've got 4 doctors, junior residents working in COVID hospitals who have called up crying, suicidal, telling I don't want to go to work. Well, we can't do anything about it. A lot of people are dying. We have not seen people dying left, right, center. We are not able to handle the relatives. A lot of grief in terms of people not being related to them. It's just that they're fresh doctors. They've never seen death in such magnitude. And they feel they should not go to the hospital because they think that they cannot do anything. In spite of whatever, counseling, that has also become a very important part. When you're talking about grief in terms of people not being related to the patient, but they're in an extreme bad condition. So how do we talk to such doctors, sir? And how do we motivate them to work where there is nothing to gain?
I think that there are two aspects to the situation, Amrit, that you're pointing out, and I see that Jyoti Shetty has also pointed out in chat that the COVID wave duty is very distressing in terms of resources and intensive treatment. And the first aspect is there is a certain experience, there is a certain emotion that these doctors are undergoing. What is the space and context that they have to articulate this with the reassurance that they will be heard and the legitimacy of their experience and emotions be acknowledged and even validated. Now, in the pressure of time, because a lot of stuff is going on, हमें मालूम है बहुत लोग इस तरीके से चल रहा है, but संभालो. And now it is intended to be reassuring, but you have tried to compress a response of validation because of the pressure of time into a 2-minute or a 5-minute or a 7-minute response, which doesn't allow for a holding moment for them. So it needs a little bit of time. And the reason I'm stating this is that if you look at any disaster or emergency situation, armed conflict, complex humanitarian emergencies, and people who work in the front line in really difficult circumstances, the organization insists that they take a week of R&R, rest and relaxation. It is mandatory for you to take leave and go. You cannot be working with this kind of that. Now, whether this leave is for 7 days or whether it is for 2 days or whether it is for half a day is a matter of that institution's choice. But at least to give that much of space, that's one part of it. The second is, now that we have recognized that this challenge and this situation exists, what arrangements are made by the system, by the institution, by the mental health fraternity working in that institution to provide for groups that allow people to come in. See, the power of of sharing and of collective learning, for 10 of these doctors who've been through the same experience to be allowed to share their stories. See, stories and narratives are very powerful. You don't have to say anything. You're there to allow the story to be told. You acknowledge it and you thank the people. There is something to learn from that story. What helped, what did not help. There is a slight difference in this person's story, and we collectively learn that. Now, these principles of and this is the most unfortunate thing in postgraduate psychiatric training. In how many centers do we look at group processes and the art and the activity of group therapy? Honestly, tell me. Not even in NIMHANS. And you see now how important this is. Did it need the COVID pandemic for us to recognize? And group processes, group therapy is a old, and we did it here in 1981 when I came to NIMHANS first. We used to do it every other day. It has just disappeared in the surfeit of this preoccupation, uh, with fMRI studies and molecular genetics. I'm not belittling that area of research, but I'm saying somewhere we have forgotten that ultimately the practice of psychiatry is about human stories and human emotions, and about human suffering and human pain, and it's about being heard and being listened to and being assisted. It is not in chemicals and molecules. And I think the social and the personal context of the practice of mental health has got slowly eroded both in our training and in our practice, and that's what we need to rediscover.
Thank you so much, sir. In fact, our last session with Dr. Harish Shetty and Dr. Anjali Chhabria was on group therapy only. And Dr. Harish Shetty has sent a few points how to start a group. Those who want it can email to us. We'll email the points and also post the points on our Facebook page. So coming to the rituals that you were talking about. So rituals I find are a very important way to tide over this process. So rituals के बारे में you told there are various ways in which they help. So would you like to revise it in a sort of more simpler language where people who are from not non-psychiatric background can also get that? Rituals and their importance in grief. Or abhi sir, in COVID, most of the rituals also people cannot do because they cannot collect at a place. So इसके बारे में sir, want your opinion.
As I had mentioned, Alim, they were, when Dr. Kenneth Doka speaks about different kinds of rituals, that there is an assumption that rituals necessarily have to be done physically, face to face. But if you look at what he spoke, and I will repeat them, rituals of continuity. What these do is they only establish that the loved one is still part of the client's life. And you do that by essentially, and we've seen this is in many of the traditional rituals, even in the pre-COVID era. Certainly in the South, when in the family gathers and there's someone who speaks about him of this thing that he did, and you remember that moment, and so you remember the good times, you remember the relationship, so that that continuity is maintained. That the use of the transitional object, the rituals of transition, and when you hold on to a certain object, but you don't mummify it, as it is done in pathological grief. So the act of even composing a letter in your head as a ritual of affirmation, or the fact that we lived in the digital world in any case even before COVID, we are forced to live in it even more. And for a person that we lost, for example, in a batch of MBBS, that we've lost one or two or three people, and the batch has a WhatsApp group, and we acknowledge that as an act of, or as a ritual of intensification. So these are rituals that can be done even in the imposition of the digitalization of our lives, which was there even pre-COVID, but it has got even more accentuated. At this point of time, I would also like to say that I noticed that many people have said on chat, you seem to have a cold, you seem to be unwell. I do have a very severe allergy since morning. Please be reassured. I've already taken
Actually, I was getting worried.
I've taken a couple of tablets of Allegra. It just seems to be a very bad allergy, and I hope it's just that. Also, to let you know, I've been vaccinated, first dose in Jan, second dose in February. I don't go out much. I don't go out to crowded spaces. I'm in an isolated space in my studio space here. Uh, I don't do any OP work. And just for the information of the kind people who introduced me, I'm no longer associate dean. I am the dean because Dr. Girimaji has taken over as officiating director. But don't congratulate me. It's just more work.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Dr. Vishal, would you like to?
Yeah. So should we start some questions? I
Yes.
have got, let's start. So I got one question, sir. Somebody messaged me directly. My friend of mine, she says that it's exactly 7 months ago today, my dad passed away due to post-COVID pneumonia. It's been difficult time for all of us. We all miss him a lot. We still cry to each other whenever we feel like. It comes in my way in the form of counter transference when I deal with patients who have lost a loved one. So she's asked me, please ask him how to deal with this.
It's interesting, Vishal, that the context is phrased as, how to deal with it, as though the basic experience of grief itself is pathological. And I think one of the most important things to recognize is that when you love someone dearly, it is quite all right to miss them 7 days from the loss, 7 weeks from the loss, 7 months from the loss, 7 years from the loss, or 17 years from the loss. Um, I spoke about my dad 20 years ago. Um, I'm 65 this year. I retire in November this year. There's not a single day that I do not think of him. Sometimes with a sense of loss, sometimes with a celebration of the last line that he wrote, which I can never forget. So, how is it that you choose to remember the loss? I could have chosen to remember that loss by the fact that he was in a hospital in a CCU which had 16 beds, and there was just a small space outside where the relatives of those 16 people slept on the floor, including me. And that's where life and fate is an equalizing and a humbling experience. It doesn't matter that you're a professor in a national institute and one of the senior most child psychiatrists of the country. For you and for the other man who was the son of a thelawala who was in the same CCU, it is the same space. There is no arrogance. there's utter humility in the equalization of. I could have felt resentment of being in that space. I could have felt resentment that the night that he died, there is no place to grieve in a public hospital. That I could have felt resentment that when he suffered the second attack, that they made me run around to get streptokinase at 2 o'clock in the morning. Not that they didn't have it, but you have to replace it. I would have replaced it in any case. I choose not to remember it by those experiences. I choose to remember it by the fact that a man is so alert that despite being on the verge of going and despite being intubated, he can still ask for a paper and write in his shaky handwriting, because he was going to say, we are all angels with one broken wing, and the only way we can fly is by holding each other. That so it is quite all right to continue to, but you can convert some of those remembrances to a celebration of what that person meant to you, and do not fight it. You don't have to deal with it. You have to be in it. So I think that that paradigm shift, or that renegotiation with yourself to say, I'm not dealing with it anymore. I'm living with it. I'm living with the memory of this wonderful person who was part of our lives. That we are sad we lost him. The sadness is very real. But here are the good times that I spent. That's the way I would look at it, Vishal.
So yeah, so you're saying, sir, that it's our choice, it's a personal choice. How do you look at the situation? You can try and look, instead of looking at how quickly the person went away, mourning at, feeling guilty that you did not do enough at the last moment. What if this would have happened? That could have done. Instead of that, you look at the positive memories, what you enjoyed with that person's life, and cherish that.
It is a shift.
Not,
it is a shift.
It's a shift.
Which is within your powers and your autonomy to make.
I think one person has talked about how do you celebrate loss. So that I think that the things you discussed just now, covered that.
Yeah.
It's
about celebrating the person and what the person
not
meant.
the loss. What the person, yes. Young children losing their parent, how do you deal with them? One of the questions.
Yep. This is where I'd like to draw your attention to the session that I'm going to be hosting the coming Saturday from 5:30 to 7:30. It's a very intricate and nuanced session on how you work with young children in the context of grief, and it's a little difficult for me to kind of precede in a brief response in the 4 to 5 minutes that we have left to close the session. It's been a long day for me, and as you can see, I'm in fairly severe catarrh right here, and I really need a hot cup of water, perhaps with couple of drops of something in it to open sinuses, as it were. But please do subscribe to the YouTube channel because this is all public domain, and on Saturday from 5:30 to 7:30, we are specifically be going into details of how we work with young children in the context of COVID and loss and grief.
So can you repost it? A lot of requests coming for it. I know you had already posted it.
Yeah.
If you can repost it right away, sir.
Surely. I've done so. Just
thank you. So
yes.
So all the now you can look. You can look.
Name of YouTube channel, please. One person has said.
Same. It's. I think it's link mein hai.
Yeah. It's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even if you put even if you put Samvad Nimhans, you know, it'll come.
So all those people who are messaging, if you missed a part of this important session today, don't worry. All Thursday musings are available on Facebook. Dr. Aleem and Dr. Amrit very religiously upload them. More than anything else, they do it. They look at this very seriously. So you will get all the information and you'll be able to replay this session. You can share this session with your friends and relatives and anyone else who wants to watch. So
Yes, sir.
can we take
Sir,
few questions?
are you okay to go ahead?
Yes, sir. Sir, आपको 2 मिनट का break दे दें, sir, for a cup of tea or something.
No.
Sir, लोग बड़े बहुत. If you
I think
want to take.
It is already nearing 9:30, so सर को वैसे ही हम दूसरे subject कर लाए हैं. So what you can do is you all post your questions here. We'll make a file, send it to sir, and it will be available. Answers we can anyways plan a new session on the queries, or we'll try to respond to all of you. So all the queries.
One of the things that I often do for Thursday musings is that I take all the stuff that has come on chat and then I do an exercise of converting them into understandable, for lack of any better word, categories of concern, and then prepare another session. I've done this twice before, and I'm happy to come back again. And
The thing is, there are so many questions that we are not able to actually address. We can't do
Too many.
But there is a very important question, I think, which is happening because of the second wave. There's a question somebody asked: how to deal with anticipatory grief? You know this is going to happen. So I think that was an important question, and if you address that, that will be very important. How anticipatory grief?
One of the approaches that we use is really the extent to which a person addresses his life and his thinking and his responses in the realm of probability or possibility. This is not to say that कल परसों क्या होने की संभावना है. तो संभावनाओं की दुनिया जो है, ये मुमकिनात जो है, there is no limit to, and partly uncertainty, possibility, probability, and sambhavna are related constructs. So this is not to invalidate possibilities, but and again, I want to use a paradigm. I'm using it only because we are so familiar with it. If you look at a condition like OCD, in OCD, what happens is that it is not that a person is convinced that something will happen. What happens in OCD is the belief of the possibility that something will happen. So you're always, living in the realm of possibility. So one recognizes it to say that yes, there are always anxieties and uncertainties. And Vishal, I had actually mentioned this, when we spoke about how far into the future have people predicted their lives. And, someone will say, I'm okay for 3 years. I've completed my bachelor's. I'll take a 1-year break where I will work and then I'll do a 2 years master. I have done preparation for 10 years. I'm finishing my PhD. I have the seed money for a startup. But if you ask this to a stockbroker, he'll say 2 minutes. Bad investment, my word will come crumbling down. So no matter how traffic conscious and law abiding you are, you're always subject to someone else's error of judgment. So you don't necessarily have to live your life in fear and insecurity. When you cross the road, there is always a possibility that a vehicle will hit you, but that doesn't mean you stop crossing the road. You gauge, and and then you take a judicious decision. So in the anticipation of something that happens, we recognize the legitimacy. हम ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि ये संभावना नहीं है, but we put frameworks, and any approach that is framework based, which uses the lens of a framework, let's examine it. What are the medical issues involved here? What is the support system that you have? Are there comorbidities or not? What are the levels like? So so far, things to be. So you're giving perspectives through a framework which alleviate or mitigate the mood state for that moment and for a certain period of time. That till the next wave of anxiety comes, or it doesn't, because the person has learned that I need to think through frameworks and through perspectives. So that's part of the challenge of any process-based work. And often the tension or the pressure that we say something and it'll lead to magical change does not take place, and we sometimes sacrifice process over the sense of urgency and that's what we need to keep in mind.
I think we should now let Dr. Seshadri rest. He is so kind to join us today despite some health problems. But sir, over to Dr. Tufan Pati sir for a final comment and closing the session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Seshadri, for your kind presence in spite of being down by flu or something. And we do hope you'll recover. We'll be posting you the questions. And your presentation had been quite nice. Just a comment, no question. I have observed it from very close quarter because I believe in an area which is here, Basti life is still there. We feel a part of this. It's not only that clients come to us, you become a part of the grieving process. You're part of the society that grieves whenever an event is there. So this mutual cohesion is already there, and you become a part of it, you feel it. And this percolates down to this thing that it is also responsible to see that the members of the society are quite made able, sensitized that they can deal at their end, because all are not going for a counseling help. That has to be mitigated at their own place, and this should be the responsibility through any media, through any part we like. And thank you very much, Dr. Seshadri. Any further question in this session, I shall mail it to you so that when you come back, you come with that. And many, many thanks. I don't want to delay you. Have a good dinner and have a good rest, and wish you a good morning tomorrow morning.
And sir, it is popularity that we have such a huge audience.
And on behalf of Indian Psychiatric Society, I sincerely thank all the participants in this evening, Dr. Seshadri for his eloquent, as usual, deliberation, and our chairpersons, Dr. Chabra and Dr. Sharmishta, for being with us and having a very good start to the meeting, with rightly sensitizing the audience about the issues. And I also express gratitude to our society, IPS Research Branch, for giving us a full liberty to conduct us the meeting. And good night, everybody. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. We'll post the recording on the Facebook page.